Cześć, dzień dobry, Michał Olszewski, Arek Hajduk, witamy Was w Zapytaj VC, nowej serii naszych odcinków, naszych wywiadów.
Tak, kolejny sezon Zapytaj VC, jesień 2025. Michale, co tym razem przygotowaliśmy dla naszych widzów?
Nazwaliśmy tą serię Road Trip, bo będziemy podróżować trochę po Europie bliskiej. Wymyśliliśmy sobie to tak, że spróbujemy Wam przybliżyć, jak wygląda rynek VC w krajach regionu. Zaczynamy od, już domyśliliście się, od jakiego kraju zaczynamy, bo widzicie to na ekranie. Zaczynamy od Czech, które są dosyć, znaczy są dwa albo trzy dobre powody, kilka powodów, dla których zaczynamy od Czech. Pierwszy z nich jest taki, że no Czechy są blisko i każdy ma jakieś zdanie na temat Czech. Drugi powód jest taki, że mamy dla Was coś specjalnego. Uwaga, zmieniam. O, Pykarek, opowiedz, o co chodzi.
Tak, jeden z powodów, jest kilka powodów, o których Michał nie powiedział, ale które na pewno się staną oczywiste, ale jednym z powodów jest Innovation Week. Otóż Zapytaj VC wybiera się do Pragi. Możecie nas spotkać 9-10 października. W Pradze, czeskiej. Właśnie na tej, tak, czeskiej na tej konferencji. To prawdopodobnie jest największa konferencja startupowo-inwestycyjna w Czechach. No i tam jesteśmy. I dlaczego wy powinniście być? No jeżeli jesteście startupem, no to dlatego, że możecie zapitchować przed międzynarodowym gronem inwestorów, możecie spotkać tych inwestorów 1 na 1, no i przede wszystkim możecie się pokazać też w regionie. W Czechach jest kilka fajnych funduszy, o czym zresztą za chwilę. Z kolei, jeżeli jeszcze jesteście inwestorem, to też mocno zachęcamy do tego, żeby się pojawić na tym Innovation Week, dlatego że tam będą startupy nie tylko z CEE, ale z całej Europy i to są mocno wyselekcjonowane, bo rozmawiałem z organizatorami i mają dość duże sito na to, kogo zapraszają. To nie jest tak, że każdy startup się tam może wbić. No oczywiście będzie matchmaking ze startupami, no i specjalnie dla inwestorów będzie VIP networking na jakimś tam zameczku i w ogóle. O tym pewnie możecie poczytać na stronie. Jeżeli zajrzycie na stronę i będziecie kupować wejścióweczki, to
będzie link w opisie tutaj na dole.
Tak, i skorzystajcie z tego kodziku i uwaga, 25% off. Myślę, że to uczciwa oferta dzięki kodzikowi Zapytaj VC. Jeszcze jedna ważna informacja, trzeba się pośpieszyć, szczególnie startupy. 14 września jest cut-off, po 14 września już nie będziecie mogli, nie będziecie mogli też kupić, ale też nie będziecie mogli wystąpić na scenie i się pokazać przed tymi inwestorami.
No i kod nie zadziała, specjalnie dla Was żeśmy wyszarpali, także skorzystajcie z tego kodu, mam nadzieję, że się zobaczymy w Pradze już niedługo. No dobra, to linki oczywiście do Innovation Week będą w opisie filmu i kod też tam wrzucimy. No dobra, no to przejdźmy do tego odcinka czeskiego. To jest może dla Was być ciekawe. Czechy są miejscem, skąd pochodzi całkiem ładne statko jednorożców startupowych. Niektóre z nich doskonale znacie i pewnie z nich korzystacie, na przykład z Kiwi czy z Avasta, albo z JetBrains i Product Boardu. Niektóre, a może nie wiem, czy wiecie, że są czeskie, tak? My się dowiedzieliśmy właśnie. Jeśli chodzi o Rochli Group, z tego raczej nie korzystaliście i pewnie o nich w ogóle nic nie wiecie, ale dowiecie się trochę więcej dzisiaj dzięki naszemu programowi. A od strony takiej funduszowej, Arek, są tam jakieś fundusze w ogóle w Czechach?
No jest tam kilka fajnych funduszy. Generalnie w Czechach jest około 30 funduszy, inwestują dużo, nie będziemy o tym, inwestują więcej per mieszkaniec niż w Polsce, nie będziemy o tym teraz opowiadać, natomiast niektóre z tych nas też możecie kojarzyć, bo na pewno kojarzycie Credo, kojarzycie Kaja, to są fundusze, które są aktywne w Polsce i się pojawiały, ale są też inne fundusze, takie jak Presto, Lighthouse, Czech Founders, czy Rockaway Ventures, a Rockaway Ventures jest ciekawe zupełnie z innego powodu,
bo zaraz do tego dojdziemy. Znaczy, na pewno zauważyliście, że nie czujemy się najmocniej opowiadając o tych Czechach i te unicorny, tu musieliśmy się slajdem że tak powiem, podpierać i fundusze musimy mieć na ekranie wypisane, żeby o nich gadać.
I bez czeskiego akcentu mówimy i nie po czesku.
Tak. Ogólnie nasza wiedza o czeskim rynku jest, powiedzmy sobie, fragmentaryczna i stwierdziliśmy, że żeby to miało sens, to nie my będziemy waszymi przewodnikami po czeskim rynku. Zaprosiliśmy gościa, który tam jest, tam siedzi w nim i wszystko o nim wie. I tym gościem jest Petr Schmidt, który jest w Rockaway Ventures, jest tam partnerem funduszu. Wcześniej pracował przez długi czas w amerykańskich wielkich firmach takich jak Google, natomiast teraz jest w Rockawayu i zgodził się na rozmowę z nami, w czasie której nam bardzo dobrze przybliża wszystko, co się w Czechach dzieje. Mam nadzieję, że ta rozmowa będzie dla Was bardzo interesująca. Uwaga, jest cała w języku language, po angielsku, więc tak. To co, zapraszamy.
Zapraszamy i patrzcie na kolejne odcinki i kolejne kraje, bo to jest
Pamiętajcie o kodzie zniżkowym.
Hi Arek, hi Michał, thanks for the invitation to your podcast. Who are you? Big question for the start. But I think how to answer best. Currently I'm a tech investor. I'm a partner at Rockaway Ventures, which is a VC fund of Rockaway Capital. I'm based in Prague. I will celebrate 1 year in the VC world in about a month. And previously, I was for quite some time in the tech sector. Yeah, spending most of my time at Google, basically building Google's business here in Central and Eastern Europe, bringing Google's consumer products to Central and Eastern Europe, and basically helping the company grow here for about 11 years. So that's shortly about me. I think also I'm a dad, a husband. I'm a big believer in the tech sector overall. Yeah, maybe we get to it. That was also one of the reasons why I wanted to stay in tech after Google. But I'm also a big believer in the entrepreneurs in Central and Eastern Europe, and basically in the development of the local tech champions. And that's why I moved from the big tech world to the startup world, and why I joined Rockaway.
Great. I think that we will include link to your LinkedIn bio in the description of the video, so all our viewers will be able to know more about you. And like the most why we invited you today, it's that because we kickstart this series about various European VC markets, and Czechia is like the first one that we thought about. And you're based in Prague, you're Czech, so it perfectly aligns with our plans here. So very happy that we have you today. And so let's start with some warm-up questions maybe, so that will tell us something about how you see the whole CEE market, startup market in the CEE. Do you feel that this is the space where the the great companies the great startups can rise, great tech companies, and conquer the world, or is it too late? Or
yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks a lot for choosing Czechia as your first international market. I think really good choice, and it's an honor to represent Czechia today. And absolutely, yeah, I think that tech is the sector for CEE, and CEE is the place to be for tech. It was one of the main reasons why I joined the sector. Yeah, some people were telling me that in 2024 it was not exactly the best time to join VC. We were basically after some sort of depression, or let's say fast growth that happened during COVID, and that was not just in the startup and VC world, but it was kind of in the tech world overall. Yeah, I remember it at Google. Google stock went up incredibly during the COVID time, during the years 2020.
Congratulations.
2021. Yes, I captured some part of the upside, not the majority of it. So thank you very much. But I think the expectations were quite high and inflated, like where the world will go, basically for most of the tech sector. Yeah. So of course, then a regression to the mean happened, and some people were seeing this and saying, "Look, like the startup investment is going down now. There is a dip. What is happening? It's not so easy to raise money. It's not so easy to find good investment opportunities." But I think that's a very short-term look, and I'm looking at the sector and the region from the long-term perspective. Yeah, and I think from that one, the place is really the place of opportunity. Yeah. First of all, it's I think tech overall is the biggest chance for the countries in Central and Eastern Europe Poland, Czechia, Romania, Ukraine, and the other countries to kind of leapfrog economically. Yeah, so it will be, when I take the example of Czech Republic, it will be the Avasts and Muses and product boards that will grow our economy farther rather than the Škodas. Yeah, although Škoda is a great company. I'm currently now sitting in the region where Škoda is present. So I think tech is the big chance for us business wise. That's one thing. And we have great tech talent in the region. So if you look at like how our what our startups are good at, really great engineering talent, great technological solution. There is a lot of people here who are good on the international scene, and we are severely underinvested as a region. Yeah, so even when you compare Central and Eastern Europe on the European scale, and then again Europe versus US is another story. We are underinvested. When I take my home market, Czechia, the VC investment per capita is at 1/10 of the VC investment per capita in Sweden. Yeah, and only 2x of the difference is the difference of the richness of the country, and 5x are other factors, basically the development of the market and the things that we need to work on heavily to move them forward. So I see that there is big potential, and I think we can see it for all the other markets. And also,
what I understand, you're trying to say that the whole CE market is still underdeveloped, VC wise, right?
Absolutely. So I think underdeveloped, it's probably a good expression, and underdeveloped does not mean that it is not sophisticated. Yeah, in terms of the founders, but I think the history, the amount of capital, the amount of things that happened, we didn't have that time that US had, or some of the more advanced European markets had before us. So I think we will get there. And if you look at the reports, State of European Tech or the C Deal Room report, you will see that over the past 5 to 10 years, the development has been incredible. Yeah. Of course, we have this 2020 to 2024 kind of irregularity, that kind of makes it more difficult for us to kind of show the trend as a more linear curve. But the trend is clear, and that is a growing trend, and also a trend of convergence to the more developed countries. So I'm a big believer in us catching up with that trend.
Okay, you mentioned, the investments per capita, and probably we will come to the comparison to Polish market, because we mentioned this report very previously, and it looks even worse than in Czechia in Poland. But you also mentioned that the growth was phenomenal over the last 5-10 years. With Michał, we are following VC scene in Poland for 15 years. Now, what about the overall, tech ecosystem in Czechia? Not only the investments, right? But what about the number of startups, or the quality of startups? What about, accelerators? What about public support for startups? Can you give us the overview how this ecosystem is right now and how it's developed over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the good part of the story is that the number of startups and the good ideas is growing and is developing. And I think it's not just for Czechia. Yeah, I think it's kind of for Europe and CE overall, that we do not lack the people and the ideas. Yeah, and if you look at the comparison, so you said we can look at the comparisons of the markets. Of course, I was always happy that Czechia is the most advanced market in the tech sector in CEE, if you take aside Estonia. Yeah, so we're not the biggest. The country has only something close to 11 million people, so it's not comparable to countries like Poland or Ukraine. But in terms of investments per capita, in terms of enterprise value per capita, it's the most advanced if you put aside Estonia. Yeah, and the good part of it also is that the number of startups has a similar trend to that. Yeah. So when I was at Google and we were looking at Google's business, yeah, which was actually a good proxy of the overall kind of tech market, because it included e-commerce, it included tech companies like antivirus companies, etc., etc. Czech Republic was always something like half of Poland. Yeah. And I kind of see that ratio being quite universally applicable also to investment amounts, to startup numbers, etc., and still kind of holding. Yeah. So so Poland, being roughly 4 times bigger market in terms of population, is roughly 2 times bigger market when you take basically the whole tech ecosystem, number of startups, investments. So that's where Czechia is today, and I think in terms of you were mentioning also the number of startups. Yeah, I think what's important is how the startups that are there in the initial stage then go to the later stages. Yeah, and I think that's a bit where we are facing the challenge, because there is a solid number of good ideas and good companies that start, but then they kind of struggle to move to the later stages. And that's both a question of money, yeah, it's one thing, but it's also a question of ability to do the right go-to-market, to get international investors, etc., etc., and not just the question of the mere dollars.
Okay. Just a short question about geography. Is it all Prague centered, or this is more dispersed across the country, or is tech ecosystem is the same as Prague ecosystem basically?
So it is quite strongly focused on Prague. We also have another smaller tech center that is around Brno. It's the second biggest city. It's in the southeastern part of the country in Moravia. Some great startups like Kiwi, for example, that you might know, are coming from Brno. But if you did kind of the regional analysis of the biggest startups, VC investors, then you would see that it is strongly focused on Prague. Yeah, so I think the concentration would be stronger than what it is probably in Poland, I assume.
Okay, you mentioned that there is this dynamic force that is running the market, right? But my thesis probably is that for smaller markets like Czechia, it's easier for startups to go abroad from day one, because there is no mid-market theme that we have present in Poland, right? In Poland, 40 million, it's enough, etc. From what you're saying, I'm getting that it's not that obvious and it's not that natural. We still have some way to go in Czechia as well in those terms.
So I think it's a question whether it's easier or whether this is a necessity. I would say almost it's the latter. The smaller market that you have, the bigger the necessity to think internationally or globally from day one. Yeah, and I think we see it for Czechia for sure. Of course, we see it for other European countries, like we mentioned, Estonia, Sweden, etc. So some of the smaller markets that have great startup ecosystems, they actually have this necessity. And I think when you look just at the unicorns that are coming from the respective countries, yeah, you can also see some of those patterns. Yeah, like the unicorns coming from Czechia, basically all of them are international right now, and all apart from one, which is Rohlik, yeah, have basically a global scope global product. They are software-based companies, Product Board, Muse, Avast. Yeah, these are all companies that basically have global products, and where the key markets might not be even the geographically close European markets, Western European markets, but basically countries that are all across the world. Of course, it's Northern America, but also it's the other parts of the world, Southern America, Asia. So basically, having global products covering the world.
How important for that is the governmental support? Are there any public funding initiatives? How dependent is that market on the public funding in Czechia?
So it's a good question. I think, as I said, that we are the most advanced market in Central and Eastern Europe, apart from Estonia. Overall, I think in terms of government support, this is unfortunately not the case. Yeah. So basically, the public funding that is now available to startups coming from Czechia and through the Czech-based funds, it's largely coming from the European Investment Fund. Yeah, that's let's say some reasonable amounts that are going to some of the VC funds that have EIF as their LP, but otherwise the support is relatively limited. So it's not meaningful amounts of money that would go into the startup ecosystem. Yeah. Even worse, we actually had long-term struggles with some basic environment support legislation like ESOP. Yeah, I remember it for many years that I've been at Google. We've been active in the discussions about how we support startup scene. ESOP was a key topic, and only now, basically this year, the legislation, let's say, quite satisfactory ESOP legislation was passed. Yeah. So
congratulations again. We still don't have it.
you still don't have it. Maybe you get to it soon. But every country in the region has some strengths and some weaknesses in terms of the governmental support. I think you are stronger on the funding side. Czech Republic has now finally passed ESOP, but overall, the level of government support has not been very strong. Yeah, there are some organizations like Czech Invest that support the startups internationally. They try to ease their lending in the Bay Area and in the US, but these are, I would say, relatively small efforts compared to investing tens and hundreds of millions of euro into the startup scene.
Yeah,
when we were preparing to that interview, we noticed some news about the FreeSE Innovation Fund that backs VCs and PEs also in Czechia. Is this the case? Do you see them active?
Sorry, which fund did you say, Michal?
FreeSE.
FreeSE Innovation Fund. So so far there has been one allocation from one fund coming to a very interesting Czech fund called Tensor Ventures. I'm not sure whether this was FreeSE, but that was the only, I would say, reasonable amount of money that came to some fund. Otherwise, I have not heard.
I'm mentioning them because they specifically mentioned Czechia as one of the target markets for them, and they are kind of interesting for our Polish viewers, because one of the biggest investors in that fund is Polish Bank Gospodarstwa Krajowego. So one of the banks that it's responsible for stimulating of growth, and we were kind of surprised that one of its biggest investments is targeted into the neighboring country. But
that's quite interesting. I will definitely look into that, because especially if they are investing into more growth stage. Is that what you are saying?
They mentioned VCPE, so
VCPE. Okay, yeah. So that's quite interesting area, I think, having more institutional money in the VC sector. I think that's one where we also lack quite a bit because, and I think that's not just for Czechia, yeah, that's for Central and Eastern Europe in general, that the vast majority of funds is going to the early stage funding, yeah, and that's a problem. Yeah, a much higher proportion of the money is coming to the early stage funding than in the Bay Area, in the US, in some of the Western European markets, and we need much more of the money in the later stages, in the growth stages, and that is really hard to do without institutional money, and EIF is not sufficient. Yeah.
Does it mean that there's like a funding gap for on the growth stage, on for the later series? That is it possible to raise like I'd say B series in Czechia?
So absolutely, there is a funding gap. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the startup investments in Central and Eastern Europe. You see it on the graduation rates. Yeah, actually, when you look at the graduation rates of startups from pre-seed to seed to Series A to Series B, you will see how Central and Eastern Europe is starting to diverge from Europe and US in the later stages. Yeah, and this is largely driven by this funding gap that you are mentioning. Of course, the fantastic startups that are raising their Series A from international investors can do that because funds like Index, Almas, Sequoia are looking at startups also from Europe and Central and Eastern Europe. But the amount of startups that are able to do that is relatively much smaller compared to what the US startups can do in US, or to what Central and Eastern European startups could do if they had Central and Eastern European investors that invest in later stage. So absolutely, there is this funding gap, and it's not easy to raise a fund that would be able to do a Series B, yeah, in Central and Eastern Europe. Yeah, the size of the fund that you would need to have will be in significant hundreds of millions of euros, so that it makes sense economically, and I don't really see such funds. So, but it's very
yeah, but Petr, but do you think it's a chicken and egg problem, right? Because there are not many startups that will raise B series and C series, so it doesn't pay off to raise a huge fund. On the other hand, if there is no fund, there is a funding gap, right? So I think there is no easy answer to it. But maybe
sorry. I think the Series B and C and Plus is not really the current issue that we have, because when you look at those later stage series and the companies that are doing them, that are coming from Central and Eastern Europe, they can do them from the US or Western European funds. Yeah. Companies exactly like Muse, Rohlik have been doing these series quite successfully. I think we are not there yet. I think the path between seed to Series A is the kind of thing that we need to be looking more at, because an average Series A in Europe today is $12 million or euros, yeah, according to State of European Tech Report. If you want to lead that round, you will invest high millions of euros, yeah, 6 million euros, maybe more. And then if you want to do 20 investments like that, then you can calculate what is the size of the fund that you want to have. So I think that's the area to look at rather than the Series B, C, and Plus, because that's a different ball game.
Okay, so could you be our guide again to the Czech market? So those unicorns that you mentioned before, how did they succeed? What was their route to success or to such size that there are now?
So every company has its own story, right? But if you look at I would say 5 or 6 unicorns, depending on how you count AVG. Yeah, so we have Avast, we have AVG, great cybersec companies. We have Rohlik, which is an e-commerce grocery company. We have Muse, which is basically a hotel management software service. We have JetBrains, and we have Product Board. Yeah, which is a company that we had the pleasure to invest in, and it's a product management software company. So when you look at them, I think one thing that connects them is, of course, strong founders, strong technological background, yeah, either really deeply in the software space, yeah, if you look at companies that are cybersec companies, or in the e-commerce space, logistics, and kind of use of software to manage that whole company. I think that's one thing that connects them. I think also what connects them is relatively early international expansion, and for many of them, US expansion. Yeah. So when I look at the example of Product Board, which is the company that we are the closest to, that's basically a great example, yeah, of a company that is starting to build its global business relatively early on, focusing on the big market for Product Board US, while still keeping the development in the region, in the Czech Republic, kind of taking advantage of the tech and engineering talent that is here. Of course, taking advantage of the cost that is lower than if you had to build this engineering talent in the US, but at the same time, kind of developing the US business. So I think that's something that really connects those companies, and there are some sectors that we are quite strong at. Cybersec is one of them. I think a strong cybersec cluster has emerged here with people now who have exited companies like Avast, are investing, are starting their own startups. People like Ondřej Vlček, yeah, who was Avast CEO, and now is starting his own startup and is investing basically across the sector. People like Michal Pěchouček, who is one of the leading European AI professors and cybersec professors, and currently an investor in an international cybersec fund. So I think cybersec is one. E-commerce is another one. Yeah, so I think Rohlik is not an isolated example. It's an interesting one because it's the only e-commerce unicorn in this space, in a sector that a few years ago we thought is the toughest for e-commerce to penetrate. Yeah, that's food, basically, food e-commerce. So Rohlik,
and it's absolutely, I think, unknown in Poland. They have no presence here yet for some reason.
Not yet. Yeah, it's basically in many of the other countries around, including Germany, including Austria, including Hungary. But you're right, not yet in Poland. Yeah, so let's see if that happens, when that happens. But e-commerce definitely another strong sector. So there might be some kind of areas where there is more expertise and more people that can actually build these exciting startups.
But do you expect more unicorns coming out of those industries that you mentioned?
I hope so. I hope so. And either they will come as unicorns that are startups founded in those sectors. Yeah. So, for example, it's a startup that's in early stage that I already mentioned. The cybersec startup of Ondřej Vlček called Ale, yeah, which I think has high ambitions, global product, really very cool solution. So it can be startups like that, or it might be that people who are coming from those sectors help unicorns that are in other sectors, either as investors, advisors, or key executives. Yeah?
So you mentioned that there is this process happening across cybersec, that people from Avast are, coming back to the industry and founding new companies, right? Is there, for example, a product board mafia with people from product board coming back to the market yet?
So there are people from product board starting other startups. I think product board is actually it's not much younger company. It's slightly younger, but there are people from product board as well coming. It's not that there would be startups like I mentioned that would be in the scale-up phase, let's say, or in the breakout stage yet, but hopefully there will be some soon.
Okay, you mentioned that you invested in product board as a Rockaway Ventures. Was it luck, or was it a focus on a specific industry? You mentioned some of the industries that you believe in. How that came about?
So I think what I need to say is Rockaway was established in 2013, yeah, and we started basically investing in ventures because Jakub Haverland, the founder, he is still an entrepreneur. Yeah, himself, he founded a few companies. I think the most well-known one is the real estate portal Bezrealitky, which at that time was an interesting e-commerce solution where you could rent or sell your apartment house without the need of a real estate agent, and then basically kind of naturally started investing into startups. And product board was an early investment, in that sense, based on a vision that software will go into the software as a service mode. So there was one that the product management area is an uncovered sector. Another one based on a personal relationship with the founder, and also personal presence of Jakub in the Bay Area, at some point in time, and I think this somehow connected. So if you say, is it a coincidence? Is it a strategic bet? I think it's something in between, but it was definitely a strategic bet on the internet, on venture from the start of Rockaway existence, and then on the international expansion of the startup. So I think that were the kind of three things that I would take out from them, and then of course a lot of luck, good work in the meantime. We were the first investor. We invested very early on, before there was a product. I think the investment was slightly below $500,000 at the time, and then basically the whole growth story of product board happened. The investments of Index Ventures, the investments of Sequoia, the US expansion, etc., etc.
Does it mean that all your investments are now benchmarked to that early success?
That's a good question. Of course, we try to benchmark the potential of the startups that we invest in to product board. I think there are not so many VCs in the region and in Czechia as well who have invested in a unicorn at an early stage. So I think it's actually a great place to be, because you have seen the development and you can kind of relate back to what you have seen at that time and what actually happened with the founder, with the company, etc. So of course we kind of do that benchmark, but the world has changed over the past 10 years. Every company, every founder is different. So it doesn't mean that we invest only in the companies that are like product board. But there are some important features of the company and of the founders that we like. Yeah. So, for example, Hubert Palan, the founder of Product Board, was really a person who knew deeply the sector. Yeah. So he was not a programmer or IT guy, and he was also not a school dropout of 22 years. Yeah, he was actually quite an established businessman as a founder already. He knew the sector. He knew how to basically build a company, and that's things that we are looking at and that we like in the founders. Yeah, that you might not be the programmer, but you need to know what are the needs, yeah, that you are targeting. You need to know the sector, and then you can build the company out of that. So some of those traits we are looking at, and we take Product Board as a benchmark, if you want to say.
Okay, and when you invest, we'll talk about Rockaway Ventures portfolio specifically a bit later. But when you invest, you're looking for those traits just among Czech companies, or you look, I don't know, to the northeast, maybe some Polish deal flow you observe. Is there any activity from your side in our market that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so we invest in European founders. Yeah, so in terms of geography, currently around 60% of our portfolio of the second fund is in Central and Eastern Europe, and that's from Baltics to Greece. And about 40% is in Western Europe, which is in the DACH region, and one investment in Nordics. Yeah, so that's where we are looking at. In terms of stage, we are an early stage investor, investing basically from seed to Series A, anywhere between €500,000 and up to €4 million per investment. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the scope of the investment. We are looking actively throughout Central and Eastern Europe. Yeah, so of course, Poland as the biggest market is also on our radar, and there are many great Polish startups. We do not have a Polish investment yet. Yeah, so I think
strongly underrepresented.
I think that's strongly underrepresented is a good expression. Yeah, I would say understatement to a zero in the portfolio.
It can only get better, right?
But it can only get better, and we are definitely interested in the market. I think in general, the Czech VC scene is looking more and more at Poland. I think funds like Credo, Kaya are building the presence there. We have been historically working with our Polish partners more in the private equity space of Rockaway, yeah, because the biggest divestiture that we had in the group, which was the sale of MOL Group that was sold to Allegro. We also sold Invia, the travel portal, to a Polish owner. So we have strong interest, and we have strong connection in some parts of our business. In the VC business, we're waiting for the first material demonstration of that.
Okay, so on the startup side, it's clear. I mean, don't worry, we even had some Polish funds that they don't have Polish startups in their portfolio, so it happens. But what about VC funds? Are you looking into some co-investments with Polish funds? Maybe working together will help this gap. How does it sound?
Maybe they invite you. Do they try to invite you to their deals? Maybe.
So we meet often with Polish funds in discussions about startup investments. Yeah, so we are absolutely open to that. I think there are great VCs that we are somehow in touch with. from Poland, including companies like Innovo, Market One, Smok VC, and others. So we are absolutely open to that. Yeah, I think also the VC investments are sometimes an opportunistic play. So you kind of accidentally meet on a deal. When it starts happening more and more regularly, then you see that probably you have some strategic focus, and you should maybe talk a little bit more continuously. Yeah, but in general, definitely open to that, and definitely interested in working with Polish VCs more.
Do you see Czech startups getting money from Poland? Because we know that there are some investments from Polish funds into Czech companies, but do you see that regularly? And is it a competition for you?
So we see it. Yeah, actually, at this point, we are looking at a startup that is being invested also by Polish VC, and we know each other quite well in the CEE VC landscape with the key funds basically from all the key markets. Yeah, and therefore, absolutely, it's a co-opetition, I would say. Yeah, because you are competing for the best startups. There are not so many fantastic deals in Central and Eastern Europe per year. Yeah, so depending on who you ask, they will tell you how many it is, but it can be anything between 5 and 20, depending how you count the success. And of course, you like to be in those deals. At the same time, the deal is often a team game. Yeah, so every investor is bringing a unique perspective. There is often place for more investors in the round. Yeah. Often it's 5 or more even sometimes. So it's both, yeah. But absolutely, it's both cooperation and competition. And if you are in VC, you need to learn how to play that game.
Okay, so now the competition thing, you can now brag. So how do you win those best deals for yourself, for your fund? What makes you as a fund better than others or special?
So Rockaway is not just a single VC fund. Yeah, we are the biggest Czech tech investor. We invest from VC to PE, so we know a much broader part of the startup life cycle than just the initial early stage. Yeah, and also basically all the partners in the investment group are either former entrepreneurs, founders, or people who have managed scale-ups and tech companies, yeah, like myself. So what we bring is this expertise. We have quite a strong track record of 4 VC funds already at Rockaway. Yeah, 2 of them kind of classical VC funds, Rockaway Ventures, and 2 of them funds focused on blockchain. So this is Rockaway X. We have invested in several unicorns already in the VC. In the early stage VC, it was 2 unicorns, Product Board in Rockaway Ventures and Solana in Rockaway X. And overall, these 4 funds have raised together something like 300 million euros into them, and then, of course, increased the value of those dollars or euros multiple times. So the entrepreneurial focus, the track record is what we bring, and it's also the experience from the group. Yeah, because the investments that we make, not just in VC part, but also in private equity, especially focusing on e-commerce, but also on logistics. Recently, we've had also investments into defense sector. These are all areas where we develop strong expertise within the group, where we have people both internally and also in the portfolio companies that we can draw on easily. So it's not just the kind of external advisor network that a VC fund is building, but is the network of basically advisors from executives of those companies and the partners that are kind of actively working on the business development of those companies. Yeah. Over the years, we have also built a strong network of international partners. So especially in Western Europe, we invest with the big European funds like 10X Founders, Speed Invest, Red Alpine. We have joint investments with them in the companies like Apaleo, which is something like German Muse, and other companies, mostly coming from the DACH region. So we can also build on those relationships when we help the companies to scale internationally. And of course, from the past, we discussed product board. So the relationships with Index, with Sequoia, and with the Anglo-Saxon and US-based part of the ecosystems. That's what then helps the software companies to scale, basically.
So you can just call your friends at Index and tell them about something, right?
So we can call them if they like the startups, then they will respond.
Nice. That's a great asset that you have. Okay, you mentioned those sectors that you're interested in, right? Specifically. Is there any, because quite a few founders probably watch our content. What would be your advice to, Polish founder that would, for some reason, want to fight for investment?
And before you answer this question, quick side note: with Michał, we will be in Prague for Innovation Week in October, and there will be Polish funds and Polish startups. So Polish startups, listen carefully what Petr will say in a moment, because that will be the day that you can pitch him.
Yes,
very good. So it's great to hear that you'll be at the Innovation Week. It's been an event that I've been actually closely involved in for the past 10 years almost. So it's fantastic that you'll be there. And I think Prague is missing its big startup conference, and I hope this will become one. So it's great news. When it comes to the sectors, I mentioned some, that we also invest into in Rockaway as part of our private equity portfolio. But I think in VC, kind of the classical verticals that we look at will be, of course, B2B software, e-commerce, travel, hospitality, logistics. What we are adding now are the areas where kind of AI meets the physical world, industrial AI, AI in energy, and also defense, or as it's often said these days, dual use technologies, because that's an area that first we understand in the group, and it's one where we see a lot of potential. So that's just to complete the list of sectors that we kind of focus on more deeply. But you asked about how the founders should pitch us, right?
Yes. Or how they shouldn't. That's also interesting.
It's a good one. So look, I think how VC funds look at startups is looking at the market, looking at the founders and the founding team, and then looking at the product and the solution. So I think that's kind of the general framework how to look at that, and especially the first two parts. I think the third part we always discuss in some way. The first two parts are the ones where we like to have a good discussion, and then a good belief that there is a high potential in the market, and that the founding team is fantastic. So I think that's how to think about it. When you look at the founding team, I think the important thing is really understanding the need and the use case, and basically the industry, and the unmet need in the industry that you are serving. I think that's what we are looking for, combined with then technical experience somewhere in the team. So I was speaking about founders like Hubert. So we definitely like founders like Hubert who understand the market and where they are coming from when they are building some sort of solution. Yeah. And in terms of the market, I mentioned the focus sectors. So definitely, if it's in those focus sectors, it is a plus. Although it doesn't mean that we will not look at interesting startups that are beyond those sectors. But basically, then kind of understanding where the disruption in that market is coming and will create a growing and potentially very big market. That's what we are really interested in. Yeah. So we don't like so much to invest into things that are just like better, cheaper, and when there is like a lot of other Me Too alternatives. Yeah, I think there is a lot of ChatGPT wrappers nowadays for all kinds of use cases. So it might be a great idea, but then you need to have like a very strong argumentation that actually you will be the great solution in that one. So when we look at that, we like things that are innovative and that have some sort of competitive advantage that is defensible. Yeah? So for the AI startups, for example, that's a unique data set that you are building and that you can kind of build your model around, yeah? Rather than being just like a wrapper of a generic large language model. So that's what we are looking at.
Will it make a difference for you whether the startup proved themselves in Poland? So, for example, they come with the global idea to you, and you're discussing the global market and the global need, but they didn't, sell in Poland. Will it make a difference or no?
It's a good question, and I think in general, a proof that you can sell to some market is a great thing to start with. Yeah? So we are usually looking at companies that are in the early growth stage. So you already have a product and you have some initial traction. So usually we are looking less at companies that are kind of pre-product, pre-revenue. So showing that you can convince customers in some market is great. What the market is, that's another question. Yeah. So whether it is Poland, whether it is the SME banking market in Estonia, whether it is some small niche market where the customers really love you, yeah, and when you ask them, when you have a reference call, they will say, yeah, it's a solution that we are waiting for. I think that's then up for discussion. Yeah, it can be a relatively small market. So I think what we like is if there are excited customers, yeah, even if they are in a small market, yeah, rather than having some sort of traction in a bigger market. So I think that's how I would say it. Yeah, whether it's Poland or not doesn't make such a big difference. I think there might be some special cases where it's different. Yeah. So for example, I was speaking about defense startups. Yeah. So I think if you are coming from a country, you are producing a defense solution, and you are not able to sell in your home territory, I think that's a one kind of raised finger and raised eyebrow and a potential threat, yeah, to the investment.
That's interesting. As a side note, there is this company in Poland that is selling military equipment, and it's based in Warsaw, and it has customers all over Europe, but the Polish military is not their customer. So
maybe it's a problem with Polish military.
So it's just, I'm just mentioning, because you started it. So basically that was the thing. Yeah, but
every rule has its exception.
Yeah.
All right, but there's one rule that we never have exceptions on. That there's a rule that when we wrap up our interviews with our guests, we ask them the same questions, and you don't like Petr doesn't know those questions. There are complete mystery for him, so it could be fun. There are 3 of them, and please just give us short, concise answer. First thing that comes up to your mind, like make it swift. Then it's fun. Arek, can you start?
Yeah. So the first one is what's your unique selling point? What's your advantage, but not as a fund, but you as Peter, as a partner who will lead the investment. What's your USP?
So I think I have seen and I have been building tech products, both, and I've been scaling tech products, both on the consumer side and on the B2B side. So I have seen that at Google, and I have seen this in a scale-up company. And so I think I've probably seen a few stages after what the startups are doing today, like what it actually means to bring a product to 1 million users, in several markets. And I think I can have good discussions with the founders about that. I also hope that I can relate to people on personal level quite well, listen to them, understand, not push some agenda, but more kind of listen and find a solution that will be suitable for both ends. Yeah, and look, I spent my whole life in American companies. Yeah, so basically this kind of global mindset, nothing is impossible. I've been living that professionally for basically the large part of my professional life, or the vast majority of it, and I'm trying to bring this mindset to the people that I'll be working with at startups.
Second question then. What's your anti-portfolio? What are the great deals that you passed on?
It's a tough question, because you never know, like or sometimes you don't know whether you actively passed on or whether the deals just kind of passed
fizzled by, or whatever,
fizzled by. And also as I told you, like I personally joined the VC fund 1 year ago. Yeah, so it's not that I've accumulated a vast anti-portfolio. But when I look at like one deal, yeah, that I would be thinking about. It's early stage companies, yeah, but cyber ops and interesting startups in cybersec would be kind of one on the list, yeah. But I don't have a company that would be a unicorn today, and that I could tell you yet, because it's not time that is long enough, yeah, for me to tell you that. So it would be these more like early stage companies.
So fingers crossed for your portfolio and anti-portfolio, both of them. Okay, Peter. The last question is maybe less on the investing side. It can be on investing, but maybe in business, on life. So what's the thing that you believe that not many people do believe in?
So I believe that you always need to start with why you are doing things, rather than thinking about return, money, etc. Because if you do things that you really believe in, you will like them, and if you do things that you like, you will eventually be successful. Yeah. So there needs to be personal fit with what you are doing, and that then moves mountains. Yeah. So that is how I chose my professional track, doing things that I believe in, and I'm also trying to look for that in the founders that I work with. Yeah. And I think that although some people say it, they actually either do not fully believe it, or at least they do not act according to this. So,
I think this is a great advice for our YouTube channel and for the Central European VC series. Yes, we really believe that it would be a nice group of videos that will be, I don't know, handy for founders and VCs maybe. And I hope that today's interview that we just had will be the great start to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And look, I want to say on that question, Arek, that I believe Eastern Europe and Central and Eastern Europe is a great place to be, and that you really don't need to escape to the United States if you want to do tech. Yeah, and I think some people would disagree with that, and we could have a long discussion about that. But I really believe in that, and I'm really glad that you are working to support that line of thought.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of our why as well. I think. At least we don't do it for money. So just to be sure. Anyway, Petr, that was a great conversation. Thank you very much, and I hope we will see each other in Prague. But
see you in Prague
on other occasions, and let's keep the fingers crossed, and let's do our part for CE to get to some nice level of success.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
It was great to be part of your show. Thank you very much, and see you in Prague.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.